So there's some new polls that are just coming in now on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. These are polls of the American public. And the responses are really interesting. So let's go ahead and throw up that first graphic there. Should Russia be allowed to invade its neighbors? Seems like a pretty straightforward question. No, 82%. Yes, 4%. Now, granted, the poll was, it was asked in a way that's sort of flippant. But, I mean, only 4% support for what Vladimir Putin did. Whose side should the U.S. be taking during the conflict? Ukraine, 57%. Neither, 25%. Russia is all the way down at 2%. These are YouGov polls. Let's throw up that next graphic. Biden's response to Russia has been not tough enough, 39%. About right, 28%. Too tough, 4%. Unsure, 28%. So people are a little bit confused, and we'll dig deeper on that in a second. Those who approve of Biden not sending troops into Ukraine approve, 56%. Disapprove, only 15% disapprove. 29% are unsure. So only 15% want U.S. troops to be involved. Only like 2% or 4% support what Russia's doing. The weird area of contradiction is like when you go issue for issue, people are like, I agree with Biden on that. I agree with Biden on that. I agree with Biden on that. So all of his specific responses to what's happening, people generally agree with. But then when you ask them in a very broad sense, like, hey, do you think he's doing a good job? Or what do you think's going on here? They say, well, he's not being too tough. But you just agreed with the way he's approaching this. Like, point for point, you agreed. Yeah, but I don't think he's being too tough. I don't think he's being tough enough. I mean, this goes to why in polling, you have to phrase the question in a way that's reasonable, in a way that's not too vague and not too broad, because people might have a gut sense in one direction or another, but you need more concrete answers. You need more specifics. So, look, we've gone over it before, but the fact of the matter is they're hitting Putin with like every sanction under the sun. They're hitting the Russian economy with every sanction under the sun. We had gone over a bunch of the sanctions in previous videos, but you had the value of the ruble fell over 40%. The Russian economy has been ground to a halt. I mean, there's a run on like every bank. Now Sberbank is worth like 1 cent. Its stock is worth like 1 cent. We saw the people not able to use Google Pay or Apple Pay in the subway in Moscow, which I think goes way too far. I mean, the line that you should be walking, in my opinion, is, again, anything you can do to go after the oligarchs and Putin, I would go as extreme as possible with those sanctions. Freeze their offshore bank accounts, man. They have all this money hidden in offshore bank accounts. Just freeze those bank accounts, seize their assets. And we're having conversations about that now, which is a good thing. But go as tough as you can against the oligarchs and Putin, but you can't punish the people of Russia. They didn't do it. They're not guilty. There's giant protests in St. Petersburg and Moscow after the invasion. And this is in a country where Putin doesn't even hide the fact that he's authoritarian and a lock-up journalist. I mean, he killed a Forbes journalist, a Forbes Russia journalist who was detailing the corruption of the oligarchs and the corruption of Putin. He killed that guy. So you could be thrown in jail or worse. And there were a bunch of people out in the streets, giant crowds of people out in the streets. And these are the people that now we're turning around and sanctioning. And so, but look, got to keep it real based on what we know from the polling. Turns out the American people are not as anti-sanctioning, the entire economy, including the citizens, as I am. Now, I'm hopeful in the sense that if you get more specific and walk people through it, I do think most people will flip and be like, oh, if it's hurting them and they didn't do anything, that doesn't make any sense. Maybe we shouldn't do that. But at least now, based on the polling data we have now, people are like, literally throw every sanction under the sun at them and do everything you possibly can. But again, do not put boots on the ground. Do not send troops. And obviously they're 100% right about that. They are. So it's interesting. People agree with what Biden is doing, but then if you ask them generally, they're like, well, he's not being tough enough. It reminds me of the Republican response. We saw it in Trump's speech the other day at CPAC. He was acting like our leaders are weak, our leaders are dumb and stupid, and they're not doing enough. And Trump even mocked the idea of sanctions. He was like, Putin looked at that and he was like, oh, you're going to sanction me like you haven't been sanctioning me for the past 25 years. And then he's like, we need to blow him to pieces, at least psychologically. Blow him to pieces psychologically? Like what? Look, I really do shudder at the thought of what Trump would do if he was in there right now. Because remember when we were in a standoff with North Korea and he was tweeting about how My weapons are much bigger and much stronger. You don't want to mess with me. He tweeted something that was like a nuclear threat. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. Could you imagine the night that Putin invaded Russia and Trump's on Twitter and he has his instinctual response to it, like the stuff he could have said and the trouble that could have gotten us into? Oh, my God. It's a terrifying thought. But, yeah, I think that Biden's been correct to say we're not going to put any boots on the ground. That's a red line. We can't have a war with Russia. We just can't. That's obvious in the nuclear age. And I think they're going over the top here with the sanctions. I support all the ones that target the oligarchs and Putin, but I think they've gone a little too far and gone after the Russian people. And I think that needs to be opposed. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.